Okay, and I'm going to share my screen and again, welcome. Today we're talking about food as medicine. So excited. Okay. Hard. I worked last night, so I can't see. Okay, here we go. Can you guys see my screen? Okay. Thumbs up.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Great. Slideshow. Slideshow. Play from start. Okie dokie. So here we go. Food is medicine. The other Greek physician that believed in food as medicine, Hippocrates, said, "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food." I'm going to share with you a story, my story. That was me as a 19-year-old college student. I was an active runner. I ran 5 to 6 miles 3 to 4 times a week. But I was part of the college meal plan. I ate everything. We had access to everything. So I ate it all. I gained, I say 30 pounds, I gained over 30 pounds in 4 years. And this was the start of med school. I was the heaviest that I'd ever been to that point. But in med school, I had to cook my own food. And the things that I could afford were spaghetti and vegetables. That's all I could afford. So every single day, I ate spaghetti and vegetables with olive oil and sea salt and a little splash of red wine vinegar. Like that was my every single day. I don't even remember if I had breakfast back then, but that's what I used to eat. And I couldn't afford meat. So this was my staple. And I found in 2 years, I had lost a bunch of weight. Like I wasn't trying to lose weight. I just had gone from the college meal plan down to cooking for myself. But then residency and clinicals started, and like we were running around trauma call, just always in the hospital. And I was finding that I was just eating a lot of bacon to try to keep up calories. I knew that it was high in calories, and I was running around so much that I was like, I need something to eat. So that's what I was eating. I was eating a lot of meat at the time. And then we moved to Annapolis, and my husband at the time decided that now that, we were out of residency, he wanted to try a keto diet and do some resistance training because he heard that was a really good thing for building muscle and losing fat. So he started eating a bunch of eggs. I wasn't really into that at that time, so I didn't really follow along exactly. But we did definitely eat more meat. I remember eating like a steak at least once a week. His cholesterol, not mine, because I really didn't follow along as much. His cholesterol went sky high. But we figured, okay, well, he's super active and healthy, and he was exercising a lot. So, we weren't sure what that would mean. And then at the time I was learning to do or starting to do endurance sports. So this was my very first marathon in 2006, the Marine Corps Marathon. The start was delayed because somebody had a heart attack and dropped to the ground at the start. So they had to delay the start. Turns out one of my one of the EMS people that I knew from Calvert actually resuscitated him, and the guy is alive to date. He had a heart attack, and the EMS guy that resuscitated him is now an emergency physician, so that's fun. But anyway, I was like, wow, these healthy people, marathon runners, what's going on? Why are they dying? And I started looking into it and realized like athletes were dying of heart attacks. And I thought, why is that the case? Well, clinically silent cardiovascular disease was present in an unexpected proportion of people who had died. And I thought that was very surprising because I thought if you were fit and healthy, that, your insides would be healthy as well. So I was afraid, was I next? And so what did I need to do to prevent this? The problem, hold on. Why aren't you listening to me? Okay, so I wanted to balance a healthy weight, athletic performance, and long-term health. So I didn't know like what to do. And from medicine, we don't really get training, nutrition training. So in conventional medical practice, maybe we might get 2 hours of training. And there's so many diets out there, right? So paleo and vegan and gluten-free and intermittent fasting and yada, yada, yada. So, who do you listen to? And everything's kind of spinning. Is this good? Is that good? And everything seems so complicated. So if you try to look, there's all this advertising and media and everything can kill you, the gluten and the cheese and the healthy diet and the protein and the carbs and the even water can kill you, God forbid. You've got to like be afraid of everything. And so it's really challenging, especially when all these people have secondary gain issues, right? Like they're trying to make money in this world that we live in, and so is everybody else. But who can you hear, listen to and take the advice of, and who can you trust? Is your, some random Facebook person the one to listen to, or the trainer at your gym? What about your doctor, who you should be trusting, but we don't know. If you follow media, now we look at this like, ha ha ha, that's funny. Sugar keeps your energy up and your appetite down. That's silly. Nibble on a cookie about an hour before lunch. But that was an understood thing at the time. Oh, okay, that's a good idea. Let's try to eat some sugar. Or how about starting cola? When can you? How soon is too soon? Not soon enough. So do yourself a favor, start your kids on a strict regimen of sodas and carbonated beverages right now. And what about doctors, right? Like, so we look in the past and we see, okay, so many physicians were smoking in the hospital. There were smoking lounges. So clearly now we know that that's not healthy. But again, who do you listen to? And when I tried to look at the hospital, well, look at the hospital food is, it's almost like a conflict of interest. The stuff that they feed you, it like takes you from the cafeteria directly into the emergency department. So I didn't know how to kind of blend those two together. Looking at our country, 90% of Americans actually say that they think they're eating healthy, and yet what is happening? Everybody is ballooning in weight, and our overweight population is growing along with everybody else, but we're number one. If you look at diabetes, just in 15 years, so we're just going to go from 2004 and 2019, so diabetes and overweight. You'll see light is good, a light color is good. So obesity and diabetes, the lighter the better. So that was 2004 and 2019. So clearly you can see 15 years, lots and lots of shifts have happened. But when you look at the data, this was back in 2013, and it's still the same today. Out of the top 7 risk factors for death, 4 of them are related to diet. Dietary risks: high body mass index, high fasting plasma glucose, and high total cholesterol. So obviously food is a big deal. And diabetes prevention is done through lifestyle more than through metformin, lifestyle, food, and exercise. And this was a study that really, really got me excited about food as medicine, and kind of really diving deep into this for myself. As an emergency physician, we'd always been taught that coronary artery disease just gets worse over time. So you start with, one stent, and then you have to get another stent and another stent until either you get a bypass or they can't put any more stents in. But through this study, after almost 4 years of follow-up, these researchers placed people on a very strict plant-based diet, and they were able to restore myocardial perfusion, that's blood flow through the heart muscle, in 3 weeks. That's on the left. You can see before the treatment, there's that area of gray that's not getting blood flow. And after, it has improved. Again, that's 3 weeks. On the right side, I want you to see that area of to the left. So it says reversal of coronary artery disease. When you see a blood vessel that's very narrowed and irregular like that, that has plaque all along it. And so blood is not flowing properly through there. So traditionally you'd throw in a stent, which of course has its own risk factors, clotting of the stent, dissection, etc. But this is 32 months of plant-based nutritional intervention without cholesterol lowering medication. And this vessel went back to normal, which I found was absolutely shocking because nobody was talking about this in medicine. It was all stent, stent, stent. So anyway, that's why I started to look into it, but I realized I had to learn the basics. So now I'm going to teach you the basics. Okay, so you have micro and macronutrients. The macronutrients are the carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and that's what everybody always talks about, macros, 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 but the micronutrients are super important. All the antioxidants, phytonutrients, vitamins, and minerals that are present in high quality food. We call this nutritionally dense food. And food is information. So these are antioxidants, phytonutrients, they help to do this epigenetic change with our DNA. So our DNA, different genes are turned on and off based on these micronutrients. So they're super important. Clearly you can see a calorie is not just a calorie, right? Like you have your beige food on the right, and then you have your very, very brightly colored, fiber rich, full of phytonutrients food on the left. And clearly you can see that there's a difference just in the way that the food looks. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but your various plants have so many antioxidants, anti-inflammatory properties. These are just some examples. Again, lots and lots and lots of these present. And these are only a few. I mean, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of compounds in plant foods that are there to help your metabolic pathways run more smoothly. To where the American Institute for Cancer Research is saying that it's very important that we include a wide variety of plant foods in our diet, and just loading up on one phytochemical or antioxidant just isn't the same, which is why it's food first for me. I always ask you guys to post pictures of your food so I can see the colors, I can see the variety, because I can certainly give you some supplements which I take myself to supplement the quality of the food, but it's not the same as the actual food itself. So rainbows are good for you, just not these rainbows. Okay, so that kind of was micronutrients in a little bit of a rapid fire nutshell. Now we're going to talk about macronutrients, which is what everybody always wants to talk about. So first we'll talk about fats. Again, look at the picture. There's a difference between the fat on the left and the fat on the right. There are good fats and there are bad fats. Fats are vital to every cell membrane. If you didn't have fat, you wouldn't be able to have cell membranes, which means that you would be a pile of mush. They help transport vitamins A, D, E, and K. And there are essential omega-3 fatty acids. Essential meaning your body can't make them. You must take them in through food, especially essential for brain development and cognition. So here are the different types of fats: monounsaturated, which are most vegetable oils; polyunsaturated, which are kind of like the ones that you, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated are the ones that you want in your diet: fatty fish, seeds, nuts, legumes, olive oil, avocado oil. Saturated fats are the animal fats. These all have to do with number of double bonds or single bonds. Saturated means that everything is a single bond. So anyway, saturated fats are the ones that when they are room temperature, they look solid. So that's one way that you can think about it. So, if you have something in the fridge and it has separated out and there's a solid portion where the fat kind of goes to the top, that's saturated fat. Get rid of it. Scoop it, toss it. Trans fats, partially hydrogenated vegetable oils, those are the really bad actors, to the point where now they're basically illegal. So they've been outlawed in the addition of foods, but they are still made through certain processing, and it's not trans fat on the package, but it becomes trans fat in the cooking. So just real quick, I'm not going to make you to memorize this, omega-3 fatty acids versus omega-6 fatty acids. So generally speaking, omega-3 is anti-inflammatory. Omega-6 is inflammatory. You need both. You need to be able to have inflammation for your body so that you can fight infection, you can heal cuts and wounds, and so, it's important, but if you have way too much omega-6 and not enough omega-3, then you are shifted towards inflammation, and inflammation is the driver of disease. If you've ever heard of inflammaging, you become inflamed and you get older faster. Omega-3 fatty acids are present in walnuts, flax seeds, soybeans, that's the ALA. But then really super important, EPA and DHA are from fish, marine sources, and algae. Really, they originate from algae, but the fish eat all the algae and then they're in the fish. So those are really important to have as intake. And generally speaking, we don't eat enough, which is why one of the things that I do recommend is that that everyone takes an EPA, DHA. And I take it myself. So this was an interesting randomized controlled trial. So I'm going to share some trials with you guys just to see that I'm not just making this up. So this is comparing both red meat, white meat, and non-meat protein sources on LDL, as well as saturated fat versus unsaturated fat. So it was a randomized, this is a busy slide, but just know that it was randomized, and I'm just going to give you the results. So if you look on the left, so if you compare the total cholesterol, LDL and non-HDL, it was significantly higher after either red meat or white meat rather than non-meat. So meat, and we're not talking fish, meat raises your cholesterol, period. When you look at on the right side, now, regardless of whether it was meat or non-meat, if you're looking at saturated fat increased cholesterol, both LDL and non-HDL. So that means including coconut oil and palm oil, those are saturated fats that are non-meat. So that helps with that question of whether those are okay. When over 100,000 patients were followed for 26 years, this is an observational study, they looked at fat intake. Okay, people are always like, oh, I need to eat low fat. It really depends on what you're talking about, because in general, if you look at the risk of dying, which the risk of dying is, let's say 1 is the comparison, as you increase the amount of fat intake in your diet, the likelihood of death is lower. Okay, lower. So you see how the graph goes down. So the higher the quintiles of percentage of fat, the lower the risk of dying. This is versus carbohydrate, and it's equivalent calories. But what are we talking about? The type of fat matters. So if you're looking at that same graph, but you're breaking it out into trans fat versus saturated fat versus monounsaturated fat versus polyunsaturated fat, this is a hugely important slide. The more trans fat, blue, and saturated fat, red, that you take in your diet, the higher your risk of dying. The more polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fat, the less likely you are to die. So it's not that you can't eat fat. You should eat fat. You should eat monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fatty acids, seeds, nuts, legumes, plants, not coconut or palm, fatty fish. Those are healthy. So what we just said, choose the heart healthy fats, avoid the saturated and trans fats. So that's the take home point on fats. Now, I do have to say this though, be careful because fats are super caloric. Okay, so I was eating probably over 3,000 calories of peanut butter in one sitting for weeks. Without realizing it, while I was in the ER, because I would get hungry and they had these little packages of peanut butter. And after a few weeks, I had gained 10 pounds and I did not know why. Why had I gained 10 pounds? Well, I was eating too many calories. So you still have to be careful and not, overdo the calories. But overall, if you're eating the same number of calories, but you're replacing your carbohydrate, depending on the type, but you're increasing your fat, but it's polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, then overall you have a healthier longevity pattern. All right, carbohydrates. Everybody talks about carbohydrates. They're the devil. But it really matters what we're talking about. Again, quality of food. People are like, oh, are you eating low carb? Well, what does that mean? Because you have carbs on the left, which are donuts and sprinkles, and you have carbs on the right, which are vegetables. And obviously, you know which one I prefer that you guys eat. Carbs are super important. They're a major fuel for your brain and your muscles. And the fiber in complex carbohydrates feeds your gut microbes. And that's super important. So you have the complex carbs, that's the brown rice, brown pasta, quinoa, whole wheat. These are low glycemic, I should change that. It's low glycemic load, low insulin release, high fiber, slow acting. Simple carbs are your sugars, your white pasta, your white bread, your sugar, your honey, agave. Everyone's like, is this okay? Honey versus sugar versus maple syrup, but they're all simple carbohydrates. So they'll all spike your blood sugar. Some are a little better than others because like honey has some, adaptogens and anti-inflammatory properties in there. But, when you're having simple carbohydrates, just realize that that's what you're having. You're having like a sugar spike. Now, if you're eating it with other things like nuts, then it won't spike as high. Okay, whole grain versus white grain. The whole grain is the one on the left. It has the bran and the germ. And so those have the healthy fats and the antioxidants and the fiber, as opposed to just the middle, which is carbohydrate and some protein. So if you look at diabetes, non-insulin dependent diabetes, and you follow this, and this study was done in women regarding fiber and glycemic load. Okay, if you look at the reference, so on the bottom, it's glycemic load. On the right, it's fiber. So the higher the fiber And the lower the load, the lower your risk of having diabetes. The higher the load and the lower the fiber, the higher the risk of having diabetes. And speaking of fiber, you know, the microbiome is super important. We're only just starting to understand the impact that it has in inflammation and mood and weight loss, food cravings. What you feed your bacteria determines what bacteria grow, and you want a healthy diversity, as opposed to you're eating the same thing all the time and you're only going to have a few bacteria growing because they're the ones that eat that one thing that you're eating all the time, which is why I'm always saying more diversity, more colors, you know, the more the merrier. So if you look at this slide, okay, it looks like a bottle. Okay, to the left, you'll see a broccoli and a piece of cake. The smaller portion, the cylindrical part, is the small intestine. The larger one is the colon, the large intestine. Your bacteria, your microbiome, sits in the large intestine for the most part. If you eat things like cake, simple carbohydrates, it gets absorbed, the carbs get absorbed in your small intestine. And look at all this, very few sad bacteria that are sitting there, and they can't eat because they don't have any food going to them in the colon. As opposed to eating something like broccoli or eating your fiber-rich vegetables, and now all the happy bacteria in the colon are going to be eating that and proliferating, and all is well. What happens if your bacteria don't have something to eat? They will eat you. There is a mucus layer in the intestine. So if you look to the left, that's a mouse that's eating a salad, and you look to the right, and that's one that's eating, you know, typical like soda and donuts and ice cream. Look at the green, that's the mucus layer. The mucus layer is thicker when you're having your veggies, and it's thinner when you're having the sodas because the bacteria is hungry and they're eating the mucus. And so what is happening? You're becoming more inflamed because you are having more intestinal permeability. You are losing that barrier between the bacteria and your own cells. So important. So good carbs, more fiber. Fiber. If that's the one takeaway, is like increase your fiber intake. Variety. Whole fruits. Don't just make like put things in a smoothie, don't just juice them, because now you're removing the pulp, which is the important part of the fruit and vegetable. And then you minimize the bad carbohydrates. Bad. They're not always bad. If you're running a marathon, you're going to need them, the simple carbohydrates. They're important because otherwise you'll bonk. But for the most part, we as humans don't need to take in sugar. So minimize that. And fruit, okay, I know fruit has sugar in it, but it has the fiber. And so that is okay. Berries, okay. There's some fruits that are like super high, like bananas. So you try to minimize that. But for the most part, you know, go to town. Okay, next, protein. Big questions on protein. Always big questions on protein. Super important, composed of 20 amino acids. These are the building blocks. 9 of them are essential. You cannot make them, you have to eat them. You must take them in, or you won't be able to make vital everythings in your body. The ones in red, isoleucine, leucine, and valine are branched chain amino acids. You may have heard of branched chain amino acids. I have a group Zoom all on protein. I actually have two of them. So the protein deep dive talks all about this stuff at depth. But let me just give you a little breakdown. Oh my goodness, I have the hiccup, sorry. Why are branched chain amino acids important? Well, they are the ones that trigger muscle protein synthesis. So building of muscle. They are primarily metabolized in the skeletal muscle, not in the liver compared to the other amino acids. And so when people talk about branched chain amino acids, they're talking about them because, okay, this is dorky detail, but 2.5 grams of leucine will trigger muscle protein synthesis through this pathway called mTOR. But just to summarize what you need to know, because that's too much minutia, but I love it because I'm a dork. 2.5 grams of leucine are approximately in 20 to 30 grams of protein. If you're doing plant-based protein, which I hope you are, you kind of have it a little bit higher because sometimes the protein is wrapped up in the fiber and it's not as easily bioavailable. But it's not helpful to just supplement with branched chain amino acids. Some people are like, oh, let's do branched chain amino acids because they'll trigger muscle protein synthesis. Yes, they will. But if all you're doing is that and you're not taking in any other amino acids, what is happening? Your body is like, oh, let's build muscle. Well, the only building blocks we have are branched chain amino acids. So what does the body do? It breaks down muscle to make amino acids to then build the muscle back up. So it does not change anything. It just is a steady state. So you're wasting your money if you just do branched chain amino acids. Next, how much protein do we actually need? Okay, so there's such a thing as so we got to balance longevity and frailty. And it has been shown in animal models and some human models of people who are deficient in growth factor that having lower protein intake will help you live longer. That is for sure. However, it also can lead to frailty, which then leads to things like inability to do your activities of daily living or hip fractures. So what are we trying to aim for? Well, athletes need more, like about 1.6 grams per kilo of body weight. And I like to think of all you guys as athletes or potential athletes. So for you guys, for people who are not like really kind of endurance, long, bodybuilders, aim for around 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram. What does that mean? Hopefully I've gone through this with you on an individual basis, but it's somewhere between, depending on your weight, between 20 and 40 grams of protein spread out throughout the day. Why are we spreading it out throughout the day? Oops, before that, on average, actually, we do get this because remember, no, you can't remember, but protein isn't everything. Especially if you're trying to market it, they put it in everything like water too. So it's very hard to avoid protein in life. We're going to do some true or false. Obviously, you guys have your mics muted, so I'm just going to let you think about this in your brains. True or false, you have to eat animal products to get protein. Well, hopefully you already know that that is false. If it has DNA, it has protein. Which has the most protein? 100 calories of beef, broccoli, spinach, or beans. Popeye was right. 12 grams of protein in spinach. But look, beans, 7 grams of protein, broccoli, 8 grams of protein. So it's not like you have to have meat. True or false? Some plant sources of protein do not contain all essential amino acids. False. Everything has everything. Every food, look to the left, every food has every amino acid. It's just the proportions are different, which is why if you eat a variety of foods, you are going to get a variety of amino acids, and your body will be happy and be able to chug away and make the protein it needs to make. But protein cannot be stored. Protein cannot be stored. If you eat a lot of protein, and we can only we can only metabolize about 40 grams at most per sitting. Any excess is converted to carbohydrate and stored as fat. Your body can only store about 2,000 calories of carbohydrate as glycogen. So anything extra is stored as fat. So when you think like, oh, athlete, let's have this giant piece of steak, guess what that's going to do? It's going to have a small portion that goes to protein muscle synthesis, and the rest is all going to carbohydrate and storing as fat. So timing is everything. You need to space it out. Don't have like a giant bunch all at once. You've got to, once you have some intake, all these amino acids are circulating around for up to 6 hours, and you have that signal to go ahead and build muscle. And so you have one like meal, you can have a little bit of food afterwards, that's fine. Those amino acids will get incorporated. And then if you space it out, then you're not overly converting things to fat. And it doesn't take much food to give you 20 grams of protein. Okay, so you can get it again from anything. Because remember, it is in everything. All right, what about protein source? Like, where's the protein coming from? Your risk of dying is much higher with processed red meat or unprocessed red meat, and in this study, eggs, than a replacement with plant protein. What about cancer? Colorectal cancer is almost a linear curve with red and processed meat intake. The higher you eat of that, the more likely you are to get cancer. And if you substitute poultry, fish, nuts, or beans for red meat, your risk of mortality goes down. Okay, so this is percentage of protein. So even if we're taking the same amount of calories in, if the percentage of what you're taking in is more protein, you are going to get heavier. And some people want that, right? Like you look at bodybuilders, the trainers are all telling you, eat a million, eat all the protein, all the protein. You will get heavier. That's just anything greater than 20%, your risk of becoming heavier goes up. Now that can be the left or that could be the right, depending on if you're exercising. So people are like, oh yeah, I can become a bodybuilder with increasing protein amount. That's percentage of your total intake. However, if you are not actually working out, this is what's going to happen. Oh, your patience. What for me to tell you guys? Eat a moderate amount of protein, 0.8 to 1.6 grams per kilo, spread it out, minimize meat, choose plant and fish sources. So now, just real quick, because I only have 5 minutes left, we are gonna fly. And if you're willing to stick around for a little bit longer, then we can have some questions. Intermittent fasting, time-restricted eating, and fasting mimicking diet. These are our intermittent feasting and fasting days. Time-restricted eating narrows your window. Fasting mimicking diet gives you several days in a row of lower calories. Lots of benefits. There is weight loss, but autophagy, so your body is basically recirculating and recycling cells. In this study, this was early time-restricted eating. sorry, it's busy. Your insulin levels, the insulin levels of the folks that did this study went down. And this was controlled with the equivalent amount of food and controlled so that they didn't lose weight. And their blood pressure went down as well. Interestingly, triglycerides went up a little bit, but right now I don't even have time to explain why, but it had to do with the fact that they were mobilizing fat in order to run their metabolic pathways. Okay, preparing meals at home lowers your risk of obesity and diabetes, so home cooking will help. So nutrient-dense, minimally processed food, super important. Okay, this is a slide I want you to see. The more you eat of each of these foods and beverages, so the more you eat goes to the right, look at the weight change associated with each increased daily serving. So as you increase the amount that you eat of potato chips, potatoes, fries, processed meats, unprocessed red meats, butter, sweets, and desserts, and refined grains, your weight goes up. The more nuts, whole grains, fruits, yogurts, and vegetables that you eat, your weight goes down. And then beverages, sugar-sweetened beverages, and fruit juice goes up. So this is a hugely important slide. Why? Well, we already talked about simple carbohydrates, right? Potatoes, simple carbohydrates. Okay, and then just because if you're eating plant foods doesn't mean that it's healthy. Here you can see that if you're eating an unhealthy plant food, it's just as bad for coronary heart disease as eating animal foods, because things like this are vegetarian. So you have to enjoy a high quality of food. And Michael Pollan is great. He's a journalist, and he pretty much hit it right on the head. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. If it's a plant, eat it. If it was manufactured in a plant, don't. So I'm going to fly through these food patterns just to show you that just because it depends on how you define your diet, right? You can't just say, I'm doing a Mediterranean diet, because this could be Mediterranean. That doesn't mean that it's healthy, right? There's a difference. That's Mediterranean diet too. If you look at the pyramids, look at the bottom, keto, vegetarian, vegan, paleo, look at the bottom. What you're supposed to be eating all of, right? Mediterranean. They're all the same. It's all the same. So eating a lot of vegetables, super important. Okay, we're showing that no matter what you restrict, you can lose weight. And you can lose weight with either low fat Mediterranean or low carb. You lose weight initially and then it goes up. But what are we talking about with like weight loss versus long-term health? If you are using plant-based sources, your long-term health will be better. Here, people had a keto diet without using plant-based keto, and their LDL went up in just a few weeks. This study looks at people over a long period of time, again, very busy, but if you want to see compared to non-vegetarians, everybody who had a more vegetarian type of lifestyle improved their likelihood of death. And the thing that was the most was pescatarian, actually. So fish and vegetables. Again, fish, more fish, less heart disease. Carb intake. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, you guys. I put a lot of slides in here. Basically, if you eat approximately 50% of your energy from carbohydrate, meaning the healthy kind, then you have the lowest risk of dying from from any disease. And if you exchange animal protein and fat for carbohydrate, your death goes up. But if you exchange plant protein and fat for carbohydrate, your death rate goes down. And that's what this table shows here on the left. So the source of the food is important. This study looked at adding nuts and olive oil to a diet, and it was stopped early because it was so much healthier than a quote low-fat diet. So it's not all or nothing. More vegetarian, less mortality. More vegetarian, less mortality. Even if you've had a heart attack, adding vegetarian, that's the experimental, less mortality. And this is a single blind trial, and more vegetarian, less mortality. So maximize eating close to the ground, heart healthy fats, plant-based sources of protein. You treat meat as a side dish, okay, condiment, something small, you know, so you don't feel like you're missing out. Whole grains, legumes, eat the rainbow. Minimize processed foods, saturated fats, animal protein, sugar-sweetened beverages, refined carbohydrates, and beige food. So in summary, whole food, plant, strong diet, like Michael Pollan said. So I practiced what I preached, ate all sorts of yummy veggies. My inflammation went down. I rarely ever take ibuprofen anymore, and was able to complete the Ironman World Championship in October. So let food be thy medicine. Get thee to a pharmacy. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, I flew through that. Anybody have any questions? Oh.
I did have one question.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
hang on. Yes. Oh,
We should go. Okay. I have a question about yogurt, Kathy. Which is the best yogurt? Because I know, you know, dairy's not good. Is that better yogurt? Or I know there's coconut, there's soy, almond.
Okay. So, you know, not good, right? So it depends on what you're dealing with. So if you're talking about dairy fat, try to choose non-fat. There's some people that really don't do well with dairy. Okay. And I tell them, if you're a person that gets inflamed, dairy is one of the first things. Dairy and gluten are the two things that I have people cut out, in which case then when you're doing yogurts, I recommend something like cashew milk yogurt, almond yogurt. Coconut is saturated fat, so that'll, you know, if you happen to not have an issue with cholesterol, that's okay. You can have some coconut yogurt. But if you have an issue with cholesterol, I prefer that you choose something like cashew milk. Or if you don't have a real problem with inflammation and dairy doesn't give you much in terms of issues, if you don't eat a ton of it, I like Fage, the Fage Greek yogurt, the 0%. It's high in protein and has no fat. And so it doesn't have any of the saturated fat, right? So, so a small little bit of it can give you your, you know, for breakfast can give you your 20 to 30 grams, boom, just like that. Super easy peasy.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Greg, you said you had a question.
Real quick, kind of, I guess it's on topic, but brown rice. So we try to eat brown rice when we're eating rice. And I was shopping recently for a new rice cooker, and Zai Rossi has one of their rice cookers that talks about GABA brown rice, gamma amino tartaric
Okay.
acid, something blah blah blah.
That's a neurotransmitter.
Right. So I guess the way the machine works is it soaks the rice in warm water for a long period of time to supposedly let it start to germinate, and then it makes the rice. So you're eating.
Oh,
Never heard of that? I was just wondering if it was just a gimmick, or if you'd heard of it, or if it was
no.
something that was
So it's
worthwhile, or
so it's sprouting the rice.
yeah, germinating. I think maybe not sprouting, but it's just beginning to.
I think that probably means means the same.
Same. Okay.
So that's super interesting. What happens when you sprout or germinate is that you're taking all the potential energy in the carbohydrate that is stored, and now it becomes kind of stimulated to start producing a plant.
Right.
So it converts a lot of the sugars into proteins like stalks and fiber and things like that. So it's like literally like a different food, but I've never heard of that being done in rice. So that's quite interesting. But obviously sprouted foods, and we didn't go through sprouted foods, it just had
Right.
information here, and we didn't talk
Yeah,
about
this was like tangentially on topic. I wasn't quite sure, but I
Yeah.
just heard about it, and I was kind of curious if you had heard about it, or if you thought it was worthwhile, or I don't know.
I haven't heard about it, so this is news to me.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, you guys. I don't want to keep you. I appreciate you joining in. And if you have any questions, hit me up in the chat and give me a day or so to get this uploaded if you want to refer back into your group Zoom videos.
Thanks, Kathy. That was
All right, Kathy,
Thank you. This was awesome. Thank you.
Welcome.
Bye.